Y'all know that I love metal, and I've got all kinds of playlists made of all the different metal that I love. But I've got one playlist that I call the heaviest. And it's reserved for songs that make me go, fuck, that's heavy. And this band, Overthrow, just got onto that playlist. Y'all need to check these guys out. Welcome, metalheads. I'm the host of Heavy Metal Philosophy and writer for Metal Digest, John Barbas. Make sure you stick around to the end of the episode for this week's Riff of the Week. And this week, I've got a fun conversation with the band Overthrow. So I listened to their last album and I listened to their upcoming EP, and they've changed their sound a little bit. But they didn't become more accessible. They didn't become more artsy. They became more evil and heavier. So that's what I wanted to ask them about. Why did you change your sound like that? A lot of times when bands change their sound, it's to become more accessible. Not these guys, they want to get more extreme. I appreciate that, but I wanted to know. So we talked about it, and we talked about some philosophy like we always do. Not the normal question, though it does come up. Without further ado, here's my interview with Overthrow. Overthrow, welcome to Heavy Metal Philosophy.
Thanks for having us, man.
It is my pleasure. And I want to tell you guys, so we set up this interview and I was like, okay, I better get my ducks in a row. I started doing my research. I'm listening to your material, and you've got this song called I've Seen Them Die. Let me tell you, I love that song. I've got this playlist that I've made that's called The Heaviest. And I love all kinds of different metal. So, you know, I hit like button on all kinds of different songs, but only the ones where I go, fuck, that's hard. Do I put them on that playlist, The Heaviest? And that song, I've Seen Them Die, I put that on there.
Wow. Thanks a lot, man. That's a massive compliment. I appreciate that.
So you put that song on your first EP, and then
first album. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
so
then,
first. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. First EP is like a kind of like, yeah, almost like a demo version, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the first full length album, it's on there and it's more production, you know.
Yeah.
So how long did that process go? Because it seemed like there was quite a bit of years between there. It's like you must have improved upon that song quite a bit in that time.
Yeah, I think it certainly evolved from when I first wrote it. And obviously it was written with a completely different lineup. Like if you know about like the history of the band, we've gone through quite a lot of different lineups and sort of permutations, I suppose. And that was a song that was written with like the first lineup, and it became one of those ones that like it was like a live staple. And again, like it was a song that I really loved, like still love like playing, listening to. But it was a case of, I suppose, we knew that, well, I knew certainly that it had a place on the first album. So yeah, but it was written while we were writing all the other material as well. So we were like, well, we've got it. Let's put it out on this Mercenary EP that you talked about. So I can't remember exactly how long it took, like how long the gap was between that EP and then the album. It must have been a few years, but yeah, we just knew it naturally. Yeah.
In relation to when I joined, I think the EP came out like a year before I joined.
Yeah, that sounds about it. You probably remember more than me.
A 3-year gap, and obviously various different lineup changes. Yeah, that's why it took so long to sort of get the fully produced version, I guess, of that song. I mean, we've played it live hundreds of times.
Yeah. And also, like, we figured it stands quite well next to the other songs on the album. But yeah, like you said, John, when we knew who we were going to work with for the first album, we were like, well, we've got to put I've Seen Them Die on there because it deserves the same amount of production as the other songs. Because, like you said, you know, it's a hard song, and yeah, we felt it deserves a place it deserved a place on the debut. So,
well, you kind of already answered my next question. It seems like playing it live a bunch must have also been a big part of that refinement process.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it was a live staple from basically the word go. Like as soon as that song was written, it was automatically in the set. And like every gig we played for a number of years, it was always there. So yeah, obviously constantly playing it live, it becomes tighter and it becomes more, integral to the set.
I think I was just going to say, I think that's the first song that I jammed with you guys, and the very first rehearsal we had. That's the first song, it being the simplest song, and then I think Jay was just sort of like, just do your own thing on it. So I was like, obviously, just stick a blast beat somewhere, and and that's where that sort of that middle section. So the demo version is kind of, well, from a drummer's perspective, is vastly different to sort of my version, if you like. It almost became, it's kind of a completely different song the way I hear it. So yeah, there's that middle section which is just the black metal kind of build up, and then it just goes into the blast, and it goes into the Slayer beat, as I call it. Yeah, which wasn't in the original version. So that was just me putting my kind of twist on it, I guess.
Well, that's a good segue into my next question, and I don't want to make this show all about how much I love this one song. I've got an EP coming out this Friday, but it's really interesting because that's, your other songs, I don't have that sort of historical document. I can't hear how they started. With that song, I can hear where it came from and then where it wound up. So that's pretty interesting when you're doing your research on a band. It's not something you get to see very often. But you said that you brought in like a black metal influence, and I noticed that on your last album it was more thrashy, upbeat, and the EP that you've got coming out this Friday is quite a bit more evil sounding. I was curious about that. I hate to use the term change in sound because that core is still there, but it is quite a bit different from your last record.
You pretty much got it right away, man. Like I think the core of what we are as a band, and like the sort of hate to use the shape, like trademarks of like what we represent, what we represented on the first album, is still there, I think. And I think to the trained ear like yourself, like you can hear those sort of hallmarks from the first album in the new EP. But yeah, absolutely, it's definitely a more macabre, sort of sinister, like brutal take on, I suppose, death and black metal. But it's just, I think it's just more refined, and I suppose because the stuff that we even prior to recording the debut album, like me and Scott, we were and still listening to real underground, like black and death metal. That's what we love. That's what we love to listen to, like sort of recreationally, I suppose. So I think it's just natural that all those influences sort of creep in, because because this being our sort of first real collaboration with just me and Scott being the sort of the anchor of the band, it was like, well, we want to put all of our influences into this new project, into this EP, but also taking from the past, like what we did on the first album, but evolving it and just going into a much more darker, brutal, sinister direction, like you said.
It just felt like a very natural kind of progression for us, and to me, and probably Jay as well. It didn't even really feel like we changed that much. It's not like we were purposely trying. It's like, now we're going to be death metal. It wasn't like that. It's just this is just what is coming out of us now, and we just went with the flow, and me and Jay have always kind of prided ourselves on like versatility in the band, like having, just doing whatever the hell we want, really.
Nothing was ever
for that.
Yeah, nothing was ever been contrived. Certainly with the EP, it really came, like the songs, I wrote them like literally one after the other. Almost, I think I wrote them in the order that they actually are on the EP as well. Like I remember writing Ascension of the Entombed and thinking, right, this is going to be the title track of the next EP. I just knew, like instinctively. I said to Scott, this is this is where we're headed. And he was like, yeah, fucking, this is great. This is the kind of music that I want us to be writing now anyway. So it just, again, you have to act on like instinct more than, I think if you have a plan, it can go well, but we've never really, my motto has always been like, don't think, just do it. You know what I mean? And like, it's just like the songs came together really quickly. And again, we just followed, like I said, followed our instinct. And but yeah, it all happened really organically. So but like obviously with the debut, it was like sort of, so to give you a bit of background as well, John, like so basically the album was basically 10 years worth of material that we'd worked on, that I'd worked on, even like with Pride of Scott joining the band, with various different incarnations, various different lineups of the band. And it was like, I had all this material, wanted to put it out because obviously I'd put in the work. So with the EP, it's certainly the first, it's almost like it's like the first Overthrow release with me and Scott being Overthrow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so it's like a natural, so like I said, because we're both like pretty much exactly on the same page with regards to, you know, what we like, what we don't like. So it was just a case of, you know, putting it on the EP and releasing it as the band exists today.
Yeah, when you say a band has changed their sound, it conjures these images, you know, of bands that make this purpose, like left turn, to be more accessible or more artsy or whatever the case may be. But you guys are an extreme metal band, and you know, if anything, it's gotten more extreme. So it's definitely not like, oh, this is the one that's going to have us playing arenas. You know, it makes complete sense that you had this catalog of music, and now that you've kind of solidified the partnership, like this is a representation of who you are now.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly how I feel, and I'm sure Scott feels the same way. We've definitely, I think, like the first album, it kind of put us in a really good position because we actually, obviously, you know, now we've got a product, you know, of you know, the last like decades worth of labor, you know, because it was obviously a big having to go through all the different lineup changes and various logistical nightmares and whatnot to actually get it out, you know. And we recorded that album during COVID, so you know, it was definitely uphill, but like, it was totally worth it. Obviously, you know, still, you know, love listening to it, have a good time listening to it. But yeah, certainly we're now in a position where, you know, I feel like even though there's only two members, we're so much stronger and we're so much more like, the output is just so much more exciting to me, you know. And I know Scott feels the same way. It's like we're finally the band that we always wanted to be, if that makes sense. So, and again, that's not to discount what we did in the past. It's great, and I stand by it. But yeah, it's definitely evolved and continues to evolve.
I think me and Jay kind of have a very similar vision of the future of the band, and every time we've had four members, it's kind of there's just been this big clash of personalities and visions, and everyone wanting things. And you know, after the recording of the EP, we kind of just made a conscious decision just to go, right, just the two of us, we're in charge of the aesthetics, the music, the recording, everything from here on out, because it's just gonna simplify everything. And it has so far, and we've achieved a lot through making that decision in such a short space of time. So, you know, we're pretty excited about what's to come. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Being in bands in the past, it's so impossible for all four or all five or however many personalities to, you know, everybody's an individual with their own individual outlooks. And, you know, I think we're seeing an example of that right now with Die Hard is Murder. You know, regardless of where you stand on the particular political issue, it's pretty obvious that the band and CJ, they're not on the same page, and they probably should be in different groups now because they can't get along, you know. They can't get along personally, and then also if you have this vastly different worldview, like That's tough to do. So, but as a partnership, you guys, it's a lot easier to be on the same page.
I think like with every band that I've been in, you've got to try and understand the dynamic of each project you're in. Like for a band like Opeth, for example, like Michael Ackerfeld, he is the lead, he's the leader. And I think everyone in the band kind of respects that, that is the case and that's the dynamic and it works. And that's why they've been such a long running band. And it's just kind of for us, we've just created this new dynamic and now we've got two new live members and they've come in, just happy to work with us under these sort of circumstances. And, it's just, there's just good energy at the moment coming out of the bands where I don't know if I can speak with Jay, but the last couple of years have been a bit sort of up and down, with the members we've had and, just the normal kind of domestics internally that people have. Yeah, I think it's working well at the moment. Definitely.
Yeah, just to add on to that as well. Sorry, to add on to that, like you said, it's very like the dynamic with the band now, as it exists with me and Scott and and the live members, it is very positive and like there's no sort of clashes of sort of personalities. They're both there for a reason and they know what the reason is to serve.
They know where they stand.
They know where they stand, and also these are guys that are friends and like the buddies that I've known. Like Grant, our guitarist, I've known him for like 10 years. I played him, played shows with his other band, and Jamie, our bass player, I've known him for a few years as well. And they know what it takes to be. I mean, they're lifers. You know what I mean? They're like us. Like they are completely dedicated to playing music, and I think for them as well, I think they're quite happy to be in a band that's all playing live in a band that's quite well established and things are actually starting to happen. So it kind of has this kind of positive feedback loop where they're happy, we're happy with them. And then as a result, good things have sort of been happening for us sort of in the background and obviously publicly. But yeah, certainly with how things were, certainly a couple of years ago when we recorded the EP, there was just a lot of, just a bit of animosity and just clashes. And also, like being in a band is basically a full-time job. And then when you've got a full-time job on top of that, it makes it that much harder. So you don't want to have to like, deal with the stress of like, people's whatever, if people aren't really into it or there's, there's just something that's not really gelling. It makes it that much harder. But when you've got, 4 guys, who are into it, who are dedicated, who want to do it, it just makes everything that much. It's still hard work, obviously, and can be stressful, but it's a labor of love. You know what I mean? So it makes it so much more worth it,
So when you have 4 or 5, however many members, and you've got all these different personalities to juggle, that can be a struggle. But on the opposite end of that spectrum, I cover all the new releases every weekend, and that means I listen to a shit ton of solo black metal bedroom projects, and some of them are absolutely brilliant, but then some of them I'm like, you could really do with having a partner, somebody, because like the drums are programmed, because they're playing like all the instruments and I can hear like, oh, this guy's a guitar player. Do you find that having that partner versus being a solo project really helps to round it out, or maybe like resolve some sort of conflict you have in the writing, or get over the hump, so to speak?
I'd say definitely, yeah, because obviously I'm a guitar player. That was, first instrument. And then, I sort of took it upon myself to be the vocalist as well in the early days. We started the band, but I never really thought of it as like, well, this is a solo project and like, I'm going to have members. Like Overthrow was a band in the beginning. It was 4 guys, but then obviously it just ended up that now I'm the only original member. So in a sense, I think it's kind of has evolved in that direction, but certainly, and I think Scott feels the same way. I look at it now as it's definitely a partnership, because I couldn't do this without him, and I'm sure he feels the same way. It's like, because I can't play drums, so there's that thing as well.
Yeah,
But
it kind of just to touch on what I said previously, like understanding the dynamic of a band and everyone's role. You know, Jay does what he does very well. I do what I do relatively well. And we just, sort of pick up on that and just work with each other well. Like Jay writes the songs, I do the drums and help arrange the songs because I've got sort of a natural ear for that as a drummer, perhaps. And it works, and it's not, we don't step on each other's toes. We don't try and tell each other how we should be doing our job, and there's sort of a mutual respect there, I would say. So that's how it works. And listening to each other's ideas, even if they are shit,
just trying them out, like that's
and just trying different things out, and just being like, oh, we tried it didn't work, but sometimes something comes out of it. So
we normally, like I'd say, 99.9% of the time we're in agreement on what we like, what works and what doesn't. So there's never really been any issues in that respect. And also, like Scott said, because I'm not a drummer, and like Scott's a fucking phenomenal drummer. And it's like, I'm not going to try and make him sound like someone else. I want him to sound like him. You know what I mean? In the same way that I'm going to play guitar and I'm going to write songs the way that I write, and it's just that we have that mutual respect for each other's work, if you like, on our instruments. And also, the fact that we're good friends, it just, again, adds to that positive dynamic, as you said. So, yeah, we just really enjoy working together, and it's been, and the fact that now it really is a partnership. It's just gone from strength to strength. So it's now like, it was like, okay, well, it was broke. Now we fixed it. So now if it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of thing. So,
Scott talked about earlier in y'all's partnership that y'all have an agreement on aesthetics, and it's not, the partnership isn't just what you do in the rehearsal space as far as writing the music. There's so many other aspects to being in the band, so that when it comes to aesthetics, it's like, in particular, I want to get to the album cover of the new EP. Like, what is that collaboration like?
I think it was Jay's idea really for the EP cover. So I think.
Oh yeah. So it's just an idea I had, like just an amalgam of just, it has that kind of, old school death metal, almost like war metal, bestial sort of aesthetic to it, which we never really explored. And I found this artist on Instagram, or maybe he contacted me, I'm not sure. Dutra O'Malley, based in, I think he's based in Indonesia, Southeast Asia, and just really loved his artwork, his style, and just had this idea. I kind of made like a really bad version of it on like Microsoft Paint and sent it to him, and I was like, can you do something like this but in your style? So again, I wasn't trying to like say, oh, can you do like this because this is what it's like, I like your style, this is the idea, can you like make something happen with that? And yeah, that was the artwork that he came up with. So yeah, it was just an idea that I had.
I think it all kind of ties in with obviously the EP tracks.
Yeah.
You sent it some lyrics, didn't you? Like, Ruptured Nebula, obviously you've got Space Nebula, and then the Zombies, essentially, in tune.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Just to sort of like, and I'm a big fan of album covers where like you look at the album cover and you kind of know what you're going to expect when you put it on. So yeah, there was that in mind as well. So just to have a visual representation of the music on the cover, basically. So
we've had a lot of compliments about it so far. It's quite a striking image.
Yeah,
and it's definitely caught the attention of people, which is good.
And we've got like t-shirts with it now, and they're selling quite well. So it's a good sign.
Excellent. Yeah, you said it was like a war metal, almost bestially. It kind of reminds me of a Weregoat album cover, except for instead of being so explicitly sexual, you've got this, it's almost like it's a story happening. I just mean, it reminds me of them in the art style and the color scheme.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit more like, I suppose, lo-fi as well.
Yeah.
We did, because on the first album, the first, like, on Strike Down, it was like, it was painted, it was done like, you know, like a proper, like, sort of graphic designer guy. So I think, yeah, again, because obviously, you know, thinking back to what I said about the artwork representing the music. So the artwork, so the music is certainly darker, more macabre, more sort of not as kind of, I hate to use this word, but like polished in terms of production and sort of, you know, performances and whatnot. So I feel like, you know, the aesthetics of the EP cover also shows that, you know, that the music is certainly darker. So the EP cover should also be, you know, in that aesthetic realm.
So this isn't just a metal show. We also touch on philosophy a little bit. So I want to ask you a couple of more philosophical related questions. Why extreme metal? What, you know, this is a hard path to take, to go down the extreme metal route. You have to be compelled. You have to love it, because
do you mean why do we play it, or more why do we love it, or
both?
Sort of both, yeah. I don't know. It's just the sort of typical story of starting on, you know, your Iron Maiden, Metallica, and then just craving something more heavy. And just, you know, when I was very young when I discovered when Iowa by Slipknot came out, and that was like the first time I heard a blast beat and double bass. And I was like, fuck, you know, this is a bit of me. And from there on, it was like all I wanted was heavy vocals, you know, faster drums. That's all I wanted. And, you know, I wanted to be able to play that. And that's it. You know, it's just wanting more. More heavier shit, basically. I know Jake sort of came from a different side. Jay's more comes from a punk side of things. Would you say that's correct, Jay? I mean, I know you always...
Yeah. I mean, I've always been into music ever since I was like really, really young. And, you know, I think about this a lot, actually, John, like, you know, this idea of, you know, why are we now, you know, like 30 years after the fact, when I first heard like Led Zeppelin and, you know, Oasis and shit like that coming out the radio from a really young kid, and like T-Rex as well. You know, those were the first bands that sort of made the light bulb go on. And I thought about it. It's like I still have that feeling for music in that way. And it's just, again, naturally gravitated towards the more extreme side of things. I think this stuff, it chooses you. I don't think you choose it. It kind of, it's hard. It's kind of like, it's like I was watching your podcast with Horrendous just before we watched this, before we did this. And it's like, you talk about the idea of free will and determinism, which is really, really cool. I think about this stuff quite a lot. And it's like, I don't know. I think there's a bit of, you can obviously control your destiny to an extent. Like I could turn around and, you know, and just say, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. And you know, just do something else completely. But then what would be the point of life? You know what I mean?
Right.
It would have no meaning to it, you know, because you have that, there's something in you that's whatever, genetic or, you know, part of your sort of makeup that makes you compelled to go to the extreme, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's literature, whether it's, you know, gardening, for God's sake. It's like you have that thing that makes you want to seek out something that makes you feel, you know, this sense of intrinsic sort of meaning. And I think with extreme metal, it's constantly there's constantly that searching. I think, which is why we're so sort of versatile with our music as well. We try all different avenues, like I'm going to the, you know, the from coming up from bands that I've been in the punk scene, and then obviously playing in Overthrow. Yeah, I don't know. It's I think it chooses you rather than you sort of choose it. And you can always tell people that are into it, who are like I say, lifers. It's been there since, you know, since they were born. And it's just a case of it gets unlocked through the years, I suppose.
Yeah, I like the way you phrase that. It chooses you, because I've said it on this podcast a million times. It is metal itself that made me start wondering if we even have free will, because I had no choice on the matter. And, you know, a lot of people don't want to hear, well, you don't really have as much free will as you might think you do. It's a very difficult concept to grasp with, and it hurts your ego. That's a
Yeah.
much more palatable and probably more accurate way to phrase it, is it chooses you, because I definitely feel that.
It's just
and you kind of have to submit to it, like, because you think, well, what else would I be doing? You know,
yeah. It's something. It's really hard to put into words. You know, it's like, why do we crave music which makes us feel a certain way? You know, like some of the bands, like me and Jay actively look for bands that make us feel uneasy, and you know, bands like Uckley's, you know, it's just like, this shit is horrific, like, but there's so much like beauty, and it just pushes the boundaries of your emotions, and it's incredible. It's you know, and there's so many incredible bands out there now, and you know, I wish I could just get into it all again. You know, I'm very envious of my son who's 6, who gets to grow up and get into all this music, because it's such a magical, you know, time getting into like all these different bands. And you know, I still enjoy discovering bands, although it's, you know, the older I get, the harder I find it is to find bands that are doing something unique. But
yeah, that novel experience.
Yeah.
Like, I feel bad for kids today that maybe they're watching The Matrix for the first time. Because when I watched The Matrix for the first time, it wasn't already in the zeitgeist. When I walked into the movie theater, I didn't know that they were living in a simulation. I thought it was going to be a cool action movie, like a mystery sort of thing. And then as it started to reveal itself, it's like, holy shit, you know. And now when you watch The Matrix, you don't have that holy shit moment anymore, because you already know. And it's like the same thing. You talk about your kids, you know, the first time hearing like Tool, you know, there was no band like that before when you first hear them. And then now there's lots of bands that do things that Tool did. There's lots of bands that do things that Meshuggah does. You know, you can't get that first time hearing Obscene again, you know.
No. I mean, yeah, you're right there. It's hard to be unique now. I mean, we don't sort of claim to be the most original band in the world. We do very much wear our influences on our sleeve, but I've always kind of said that our kind of where I feel like we stand out perhaps is where we are very versatile, and you will never expect the same record twice.
Yeah,
like we've got the next record already written, and it's vastly different to the EP. You know, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not something anyone's going to expect.
But it also has the hallmarks, like we were talking about before, of like, you could play the first album, you could play the EP, and then you could play what will be the follow up, and they're all completely different. They're all different worlds, you know, unto themselves. But you said that's still Overthrow, you know. So that's like the only, I suppose. It's not even really a conscious thing. It's just happened. It happens. It's going to sound like us because it's us. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whether we explore this genre, you know, it'll always be us because we wrote it. You know, it's a really exciting time to be in Overthrow.
Yeah. Well, Zoom is telling me that I've only got 5 minutes left because I don't pay for Zoom. So let's close on that. You've already got the next record written. So can we expect, like on the last record, that any of the songs off of this EP will be on the next record, or is it just 100% brand new?
It's going to be 100% brand new. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, the EP, we're extremely happy with the EP, and that is what it is. And then, you know, we're obviously going to be gigging and promoting that, you know, for the next however long, and then we're going to start recording the second album, sort of probably, I would say early next year. We'll start tracking, and then we'll see how long it takes. But yeah, it's going to be a whole new batch of songs that we're really, really excited about.
I think the EP, I'm not even sure we were going to do an EP originally, because we don't write stuff sort of chronologically. It's kind of, Jay just writes songs, like that's what he does in his spare time. And then we, you know, we're very fortunate to be one of those bands that just has a massive library of demos and you know, me and Jay sit down and we sort of piece together, oh, that's an EP, that could be an album, you know. And those four songs just sat together beautifully, you know. And that's why we're not going to do that. We're not, you know, I know bands do that and that's fine. I think Aborted do that, don't they? They always, they have songs on an EP and then they re-release it later. But I think having an album is all about, you know, capturing a moment. And I think like we captured a moment with the EP, and you know, we don't really want to we don't want to sort of go back in time. You know, that's done now. Let's move on.
And we're sitting on a plethora. I've looked today. I've probably got about another 4 albums worth of material that we need to just like basically sit down and sort of sift through. Because like Scott said, this is all I do. You know, I have a job, but then apart from that, like even prior to coming onto this podcast, I was working on music. So, and I was very active, especially during lockdown. You know, I just sat in my room for basically 3 months and just wrote music and sent it to Scott, and it's like, what do you think? What do you think? And yeah, we're in a pretty good situation where we're not going to run out of material for a while. So yeah, it's going to be good.
Well, I think that is a perfect pitch for the new EP. You're not going to put any of these songs on the next record because the EP, you're happy with it. It is good the way it is. And I agree with that sentiment, having listened to it. Ascension of the Entombed coming out this Friday, October the 13th. Y'all make sure you'll check it out. I'll definitely shout it out on the weekend show that I do. I very much appreciate you guys coming on. Very excited for the EP and the following albums afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate it, man.
Thank you.